satellites? A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth.
Welcome to Satellite Haiku. I'm MiLo.
I'm Shawn. I still have this cold, man. It laid me out this week. I have like a chest rattle.
Yeah.
Like if I did a strong exhale right now, it would sound like radio static, and at the end it would send me into just doing that would send me into a coughing fit, a painful coughing fit. Like my whole thorax feels beat up right now from coughing.
Sorry, man.
It wasn't even that bad. Like when I was in the thick of the cold, it wasn't even that bad. But the symptom, like the mucus, when it descended into my chest for this last, like I'm winded. Just walking around my house gets me winded right now. My lungs are operating at like half capacity.
And it's true that you guys have stairs. So I
was running around just now getting my my headphones. Oh, my headphone cable. Oh shit, I forgot that. Yeah, so
yeah, it's a totally different world.
But I got that low register to my voice, which I kind of enjoy.
Yeah, especially at the tail end, you get the nice. It's good. Yeah. Speaking of which, because like pulmonary distress, what's going on with you in the hantavirus?
That's what my wife said. She was like, "I hope you don't have hantavirus."
I mean,
I don't know. I haven't heard any updates. I literally don't follow the news anymore. I mean, not like the headline news. I don't look at the New York Times or CNN or NPR or BBC. I don't look at any of like the headline top story news. I get sort of the next tier of, like I have my favorite sort of, I guess you could call them analysts or public intellectuals on certain topics. And, and they're tuned into the stuff. And so I kind of get a secondhand filtered, synthesized version of the news. I just can't. I can't. I don't understand. Like, I get no value out of the actual news. Like, I can't stand how the New York Times reports on politics. So, and then like international news, like it's just depressing, and there's not really anything I can specifically do about like that I'm not already doing about, horrors abroad. So
yeah,
I just don't follow it at all. So I don't know I have no idea what's going on with the hantavirus.
Well, I admire that, and I kind of wish that was my practice, but it's very Neil Postman amusing ourselves to death. What's the point of?
Yeah, he's the kind of guy I don't follow him specifically. I don't even know if he's alive anymore or what his thing is, but like his kind of his category of analysts and analysts and intellectuals is kind of the level of on which I follow everything.
Right.
People who would be sort of like that guy. Teachers and professors and historians and whatever. Go ahead. What were you saying?
Oh, and what I was going to say is, what's interesting is he passed away long before. He was my professor in like the 91 was I graduated.
Yeah.
So I don't actually know when he died, but imagine if he was around for social media and for all of the sort of dopamine cycle things.
Gosh,
he would have a lot to say about that, because he was just talking about television, like actual television, like network television or newspapers, but and radio. But yeah, so just to clarify the hantavirus, we all, I think globally, we have gone through a trauma around the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
Like no one would like
it was a multi-layered trauma. It wasn't just the effects of the pandemic, the direct effects of the pandemic. It was all the corollary effects of like the discourse around the pandemic and the politics around the pandemic. Like it was a trauma on multiple levels. Like it revealed this epistemic crisis that we have in the world that I think is at the root of a lot of other problems. So yeah, we went through a trauma, and it was like a multi-layered trauma.
And remember when we were talking about a few episodes ago, we were talking about like that the species tends to dislike sitting in uncertainty. And that's perhaps why we created religions, like it's probably,
Yeah, like there's a spectrum of people's ability and comfort with uncertainty. Yeah.
And so the pandemic presented a series of like, you didn't really know what it was. You heard it was like 1918 was the last time we had like a real global pandemic and all these people died. We didn't know if it was transmissible, via respiratory, like particles, how long they stayed in the air, like all these little uncertainties.
Yeah. Yeah.
This one, the hantavirus is, I've experienced it in northern Arizona. If you're staying in a cabin and there are mouse poops on the floor in the corner.
Yeah, I remember hearing about it when I lived in Arizona. How it would, you had to be. There were outbreaks in the northern parts of the state,
but people typically would sweep the dried mouse poop into a pan, and then they'd breathe the little dust particles.
But even so, like you heard about outbreaks from time to time. It wasn't like a constant thing that you would hear about. Like I would hear about, every couple of years there'd be some hantavirus outbreaks.
But the difference between this and the Andes variant is that all the ones across North America, and it's all over the world, like basically mouse virus, like bats harbor, rabies, and it's like, and the you had to like sweep up the particles, breathe those airborne particles, and that attacked your kidneys. Like it shut your renal failure was the cause of death.
Yeah.
This one is pulmonary, and it's the only variant that's human to human transmissible. So one human who has it can give it to another.
So the other, the ones that used to break out in Arizona or sometimes break out in Arizona, that variety or strain of the virus is not transmissible between humans. You can only get it from the
get it directly from the mouse droppings. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I knew the current one was contagious, infectious, whatever you call it.
And it's been around long enough. Like it's in southern Argentina and it's in the Andes. So it's like areas where they have had outbreaks. Like I looked it up, 2018, there was a birthday party where 30 people got it from one person,
Okay.
Like the first SARS, which you were not transmissible, you were not contagious until after the onset of symptoms, which meant it was easy to stop.
Is that the case with this?
That's what's unknown. Like it's unknown because it was a cruise ship and because, they didn't know what they had. The husband and wife were bird watchers. One of them, they both caught it, or one of them caught it at a bird watching. They claim it was like they went to a dump. What's that called? Like a landfill where there were lots of birds, and they got on the ship, and the husband died of it, and then the wife maybe she died of it too, but the doctor caught it from them because he was, and it's supposedly close contact, like hugging someone, touching someone's face, touching, it's supposedly not airborne, which means that's the scariest thing is if
it's airborne, it doesn't travel well or it dies quickly.
Yeah, it dies quickly.
Whatever. Yeah.
Like I remember when in the 90s when they talked about HIV virus, like if a waiter had HIV and they sliced their finger and it dropped on your salad, by the time it got to your table, it was dead. And then by the time your saliva like destroyed it, it was like in your stomach acid.
Right, and also it didn't, like going into your stomach doesn't really cross into your bloodstream. Really.
Right, and through those like acid pathways, it just was destroyed. So like it was impossible to catch it from a drop of blood in salad, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so long story short, this one, and so I remember, it was last week we didn't really talk about it, but this week. I remember seeing the story and thinking, oh shit, I don't want to do another pandemic. Like I'm just kind of like done.
Yeah, we don't like, that's the last thing we need right now. We've got a pile on right now of all the dumb shit. We don't need a pandemic on top of that will just that will also exponentially increase the dumb shit.
Yeah. So,
like a pandemic alone would be bad enough, but the corollary dumb shit effects of a pandemic right now is like we definitely don't need that.
Right, exactly. Like nobody wants RFK Jr., a lawyer, to be in charge of a health crisis.
No, my mom probably does, but not many people would want that. Yes.
Anyway,
there's a few people that would want that. I see RFK. for president stickers on the backs of cars once in a while around here.
Oh Lord.
And it's funny because I have this thing where I need to see who's driving that car. Like what kind of person is it?
Totally.
Yeah.
All right. So to make a long-winded thing. So anyway, I got a little bit stressed out about the hantavirus, but I'm managing it. I watch once in a while, once a day. I kind of keep an eye on it. And two of the people flew home before to Arizona, and they're being monitored. Takes 6 weeks to be completely clear of the virus. Like you could be harboring the virus for 2 to 6 weeks, and then also no one knows whether you're contagious.
I guess
prior to onset of symptoms.
Just to kind of raise, okay, sorry. So keep going. What's is that the end of the sort of the status report on hantavirus?
That was the end, and it made me think of it because you said I have this wicked cold and it's going into my lungs.
It's in my lungs,
And I mean, it's ridiculous.
Pretty much every cold I ever have goes into my lungs, and I think it traces back to like me being a preemie baby, and your lungs are one of the last things to develop, and so preemies often have chronic lung issues through their life. And
so that your dad smoked Camel Straight.
And my parents smoked. Both parents smoked when I was growing up.
In the house? Did they smoke in the house?
Yeah. My grandfather definitely, when he would come over a lot and he smoked just wherever, he would not, like listen to anybody. And in fact, he would light up multiple cigarettes in different rooms of the house.
That's so classic. Did your dad though go outside?
And then I had asthma. My brother had really bad asthma. He had to spend nights here and there. Like he was admitted to the hospital multiple times and had to like be in an oxygen tent for 2-3 days at a time, a few times in his life. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. Anyway, jumping back.
One of those things my mom feels really guilty about because she's like, I was a smoker and here you are with asthma, going to the hospital, and that didn't like make me quit smoking.
I remember a really impressive thing was we would be walking together, let's say on the campus. And our class, I think in the freshman year of college, like 80% of the female students smoked. It was so they used to let people smoke inside.
I don't think it was that many, but I think it was just a handful, but it just like a few can seem like a lot.
I feel like we did a poll though, and it was like much higher than 50%. But I could be wrong about that. But anyway,
I don't
remember inside of Pendleton Hall where the classrooms were around and they had that inner sort of community room, and people were allowed to smoke in there.
Yeah.
It was awful. Like we would walk through it, but what was impressive?
It was like the smoker's lounge.
You had this allergy where if someone walked by you and a tiny little puff went across your face, your nose immediately stuffed up.
It seemed to be, I seemed to be especially vulnerable, like in an outdoor setting. It was almost as if my body was like fully off guard, like not guarding against any, like my immune system would be like turned off because it's like, oh, it's a beautiful day. And so like in those moments, it seemed to hit me harder. I don't know if there's any, it's just pure perception, it's just a subjective thing. I don't know if that had anything to do with my type of allergy or anything, but it did seem to, it seemed to hit me harder in those contexts.
And it was kind of instantaneous. Anyway, all weaving back around, the whole thing is that looking at the painting behind you and the painting over my right shoulder, I have a show tomorrow from 5 to 7 where I'm presenting with another artist, like 5 or 6 pieces. And I've painted 3 new ones.
Oh, nice.
And I gave myself.
You want me to send this to you so you have more for your show?
No, I'm okay. I have plenty in the house. Thank you.
It was a joke.
But one thing I'm looking at, the older ones.
It could have a label on it, like lent by, what do they say?
Oh, yeah. In Providence of, or...
at museums and stuff, they'll say like, on loan from the collection of Shawn Smith in San Francisco, California.
Yeah, totally.
It would look really, it'd be really kind of...
Your collection, though, should be both your last names, like Sugitan and, you know what I mean? Like it should be...
Sugitan Smith Collection.
Sugitan Smith
on loan from the Sugitan Smith Collection in San Francisco, California. Yeah, that'd be sweet.
That's good. That's good. But anyway, so one thing I'm noticing is that, and I'm asking this question is, if painting for me is a way for me to process complex emotions, like anxieties and things like that, or I gave myself permission to I haven't painted for such a long time, so I gave myself permission to just go for it. And I don't actually like them. They're very messy and very complicated and too many lines and too much different colors. And it's kind of, but if I sit back and think, that's kind of me interpreting the world, and it's how I see the world. But I look at the one behind you, and I think it's so peaceful. Like it's so, it looks like if an impressionist had like some like goop in his eye and like went to a pond with, lilies or something. You know what I mean? Like it has that kind of peaceful Zen approach.
It's like if you look at a Bob Ross painting, like with your eyes squinted, like really
squinted
far.
down.
It's like, that beautiful lake.
Yeah,
I think it's a lake.
The lake. Yeah, it's a lake, and then there's like golden.
There might be a friendly tree somewhere or a dock. I can't really tell. Yeah,
I once went to a Halloween.
Like that guy has the best vibes. I don't necessarily appreciate that kind of art.
Right? No, he really was really impressive.
That dude had good vibes.
I went to a Halloween party at
Naomi watches Bob Ross and paints Bob Ross paintings. While like she'll pull up his videos on YouTube and like she'll whip out her paints. And
he is the late Bob Ross. I think he passed away. But
yeah, he passed away.
But I went as
all his stuff,
Bob
all his
Ross.
content is still on YouTube. Yeah.
I went as Bob Ross to Halloween at my corporate job.
Nice.
And I had like one of those huge wigs that was like around, and I had all the brushes and everything. It was fun. I think I carried like a
That's got to be like a crowd pleaser at a Halloween party.
Yeah, it was like I think our team it was a competition, and I think our little communications team won the out of 1,500 people. But anyway, so my question, I'm asking myself this open question, which is, if I were to completely just like open my mouth or open my heart and let the paintings out, like I'm getting this really complex that. I like that if it's an interpretation of my view of the world, it's equivalent, or it's a proxy for my inner world, and I would like to go back to that, which maybe requires me to do a lot more work, like a lot more meditation.
To go back to remember simplicity. Go back to simplicity.
Yeah,
it makes me think of Barrett Smith's like process, which is it was so laborious because this is what it was. He would produce complexity, like a lot of material on the canvas. Yeah. And then he would just paint over it in white.
I remember that, yeah.
And then he would sand it off just more or less in different areas so that the under layers of complexity would come through just a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
And then he would put his more simple painting on top of that.
Wow. I do remember seeing early on, like,
it wasn't always white. Sometimes it was just a layer, solid color.
A solid color. Just something about that is it is obviously, but what I found is I'm looking at these paintings around my house that are 20 years old. Yeah. And I think I was going through a divorce, and I was, but there's less layers, but they're more profound, if that makes sense. Like there's less going on, but less is more in this case. And I'm certainly struggling with that in the new work. I'm actually going to go back and paint.
It sounds like every artist struggle in a way, though. Like you look at your work and you wonder, like, I wish it was a little bit more like X or Y. Like, you know what I mean? Like it is what it is right now. It is what it needs to be at the moment.
I'm totally satisfied with that answer. And I actually, what it's done is it makes me want to paint more, and it makes me want to head in a more defined direction. Like I kind of know what I'd like to see come out instead. But it's fun. It's fun to be kind of struggling in that way and be right on the cusp of like a new body of work that I do appreciate. I mean, it also, the other thing is I have always made my own frames, and I've made my own stretcher bars, and I've made my own panels. And I used to use that as a trick, like getting all messy and hot with the table sawdust and stuff, and like would get so sick of it that I would be ready to paint. Like I was just couldn't wait to start painting. Whereas if I sat there, if I bought one and brought it home, like I bought a panel and sat there, I'd have that blank page, blank canvas kind of freeze. In this case, I'm getting older, 57, and I'm thinking like, God damn, this is hard work, man. This is like,
excuse me.
I'm spending like 70% of my effort building the fucking wood frames and the stretcher bars. And I'm just like exhausted by the time I start painting. So I'm ready to maybe hire an assistant or hire a carpenter to make them for me, because it's weird. But it is fun to use all those tools like table saws and drills and have all the right tools. It's really satisfying.
That's cool.
Yeah. Anyway.
Nice.
Yeah, we were going to talk about. We were going to talk about.
No, I was going to say I was going to say what you were about to say, which is that we were going to talk about like belief and non-belief and kind of our journeys to where we are now.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know kind of like just to start with kind of where you are right now. Like what is your current state of belief or non-belief?
It's interesting.
How do you describe it? How would you label it?
I would say I'm an atheist, like science atheist, who would aspire to be an agnostic, if that makes sense.
Okay, how do you differentiate those two terms?
So for me to be an agnostic, I imagine, and I've never deeply looked at the definitions, but I imagine for myself an agnostic.
I think the definitions are a little muddy right now. I mean, like there's sort of maybe the dictionary definition, but like it doesn't matter much because of how people use these terms.
Yeah,
people load them up with their own idea of what they mean. So I think it's always important to sort of define them for each person. Sort of needs to define them for themselves.
And for me, and I don't know the root of atheism, but the agnostic is you don't know, like not knowing, and not knowing meaning like there might be a God, there might not be a God, I just don't know. Versus atheist, who's like, that's just the opium of the people. Like there's no proof at all that there's any kind of higher being other than like.
I'll pause just to say that I define those terms a little differently. Like atheism, the word atheism itself just precisely means I don't believe. So
I don't believe.
And so non-belief, it's a state of non-belief. Now, a state of non-belief doesn't mean believing in the absence of God. It isn't a belief system that there is no God.
Right.
It's just not like, so for me, the word atheism holds the I don't know within it because
interesting.
I don't know, therefore I don't believe, therefore I'm an atheist. Like if I don't know, there's nothing, I can't believe in something that I don't know whether it exists or not. So then I'm an atheist. So for me, agnostic means something subtly different, which is just that like agnostic, like when I think of the other contexts where you would use agnostic, where you'd be like, I'm OS agnostic. Like if you were getting a new job and they were like, you want Mac or PC? And then be like, oh, Mac or Windows? And you'd be like, I'm OS agnostic. I can work with whatever. Like for me, agnostic in most contexts kind of means like, I don't really care.
Right.
Whatever, whatever.
I don't hold an opinion.
And so I don't really like to use that with this context because I do care about it. It's a topic that I'm really interested in.
Yeah.
And so for me, the word agnostic kind of suggests a level of disinterest. So I tend to just use the word atheist. And so like, but you're right. It has this problem where a lot of people on the religious side think of the word atheist as an atheist is somebody who believes there's no God. Right? That's different to me. I feel like there should be a different word for that. It should be like an anti-theist or something like that. But it does have that problem. And then there's people that have tried to like resolve that by talking about positive atheists, which means I have a positive belief that there's no God, versus negative atheists, which is like I don't have a belief in God. And the reason I don't have a belief is because like there's no God. No God has been proven to exist, so I can't believe in a God. There might be one. I'm open to the possibility, but so far there isn't one to believe in, as far as I know.
So one of the things that, if I go back in time, my grandfather was a bishop in the Swedenborg church. My dad became a minister. I asked my parents if I could move to the Academy of the New Church, which was the parochial version of the Swedenborg church in our area. From a public school. Like I asked to transfer in as a junior in high school. And I was interested in taking religion classes. The one thing that I sort of dove in headfirst like a superstar Mormon missionary kid was conjugal love, and like the idea that a marriage could be a spiritual partnership and that you would find someone who was then your partner in the afterlife, you could die and go to heaven together. So, and you had asked me, when did I start to change? And I remember in college, we took more religion classes that were a little deeper dive. And Swedenborg has this book, Divine Love and Wisdom, which is more of like an esoteric, kind of defines his way that the universe is constructed, is what I would say. And
that's where he talks about providence, for example.
Well, he has a book called
Divine Providence is a different book. Divine Love and Wisdom, right?
It's really just about like how the universe is constructed,
right?
Like how like molecules and energy flows and stuff. And in it, he kind of dispels this idea that it's a Christian religion by saying like it's non-dualist. Like there's no thing other than the Lord, who's God, right? And everything is kind of like a symbol of that energy, like sort of reflecting back or something. And at that point, I was like, weird. Like it doesn't seem at all to me. It makes a lot of sense, but it doesn't at all seem. So that was the beginning of my like really looking at it as maybe we're just pasting on, because we feel uncertain and we're afraid of death, we're pasting on some kind of construct that makes us feel more comfortable, and that's what it looked like to me at that point, right?
Yeah, that's what you said last time, and I think I really, really latched onto that because this idea that what he described was this non-dualism.
Yeah,
was something that stuck with me at that time too. And it didn't register quite as significantly. Like I do remember having it register in my intellect, not necessarily my heart at that time. That, oh wait, like it doesn't make sense that a Christian church was built around this stuff. Like it did create a separation between those two things for me, just like you described. Like it's like, oh, this other thing was sort of built to contain, to sort of like manifest this Swedenborg thing, but it doesn't really make sense for that.
Right.
Yeah. So I had that. I remember having that same sort of like epiphany at that time. Yeah.
And then,
it's weird now I say epiphany. Isn't epiphany like the etymology of that word? Isn't that when the angel appeared to Mary?
I actually, no, maybe you're right. It sounds familiar.
That's referred to as the epiphany, but I don't know like if that's just because that's the word that was used in like the New Testament Greek for that. It probably was a word already, but.
And I don't want to offend any listeners by being so sort of snarky about it, but that story, like if you get far enough away from your religious upbringing and you kind of look back at the story from outside, I used to joke to my wife, who was raised Catholic and is a scientist now and isn't a practicing Catholic. I would say, wow, the mother of God, Mary, the mother of Jesus, is the only teenage girl that ever got away with telling her parents, we didn't have sex. I don't know how I got pregnant. Like she's the only one. And for 2,000 years, everyone has believed her, but no other girl afterwards.
Her story caught on way more than she thought it would.
Like think about afterwards, like
she's like, oh my God, what did I just do?
And no one else has ever been able to pull that off. They're like, but I swear we didn't have sex.
She was like, I was only trying to keep my parents from slapping me around. And I didn't mean to create this.
And he said it was just the tip. It was like,
oh my God.
I mean, I kind of can't believe that story.
It is really true though. When you can find lots of examples of this online. Like somebody will be, describing literally the sort of the doctrines of like the Mormon Church or Scientology or Zoroastrianism or whatever. And there are points where, or Hinduism, like how the Hindu cosmology
in Swedenborg,
totally. And so you start describing this stuff, and then if you just put straight up Christianity in that same bucket, and you describe it literally what the doctrine describes as here's what happened, here's what God is, like the notion of the Trinity, it already like starts to get really weird and falls apart, right? Like with most Christian churches, you have one God, but he had a son, but the son is also God. So is it one or two? Well,
there's the Holy Ghost, which kind of smears them all together.
Forget about that for a second. There's also the Holy Spirit or the Holy Ghost. So there's a Trinity, but it's all one. And it's like, you lost me already, right? Like, like as soon as you start talking it's like, yeah. But so like in that moment or in that time, like I think you touched on something that I think is important, which is there's sort of a seed of questioning that happens. And once that little germ of a question, sort of like that little worm of a question or grain of sand in your shoe of a question about your religion is there, you kind of can't help but sort of poke at it and you know, and then it widens and widens, right? Like, so for you, was that the sort of like the origin of just like where your questions began, and then it kind of like expanded from there? Or were there other sort of like holes that started to develop in that were totally independent of that one?
So that's a great question. And one thing I was thinking about, because I've been thinking about it, I guess, for 2 weeks, but there's this difference between, I feel like a lot of people go to church to be part of a tribe, to be part of a group. Like, it's almost like you want to join a gang when you're a teenager.
Yeah, there's like the earthly reasons for a church.
Yeah, and there's plenty of them. And there's plenty of, you get a lot of like kind of community feedback, communal kind of thing. You feel like you're among believers. And so you know, and if you doubt things, they go, oh, you could just have to have faith or whatever. So I feel like there was that. And when I had kids, I wanted to sort of, at first, to bring them to church, because that's what I did. And there was a pivotal moment when the pastor of the church, we had a little bit of conflict when George Bush Jr. invaded Iraq. And there were these war hawks. The elder generation were war hawks. And we were like in this young kind of band that was playing at the church. It was fun, you know. And my wife teases me because she listens to all the folk songs that I've written, like 25 songs. And she's like, wow, I think you're actually like a Christian singer. Like, you could easily put your stuff on and pretend you're a Christian singer, because you refer to like
maybe that's your next career, because like all those mega churches, like they're big with their, you know, their bands and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it might be tricky for me to get up there and say anything, because I would.
No, you just have to be the mega church Christian band. Or you don't have to say anything. The pastor is separate. You're just the band.
My dream of being a musician is that I can sit at home. There's a guy named Flashbulb, who's like a jazz. He's like a crazy smart coder, and he's also a jazz guy. And he just makes music and puts it online, and people pay his Patreon thing. And he doesn't tour, he doesn't release albums, he doesn't put it on streaming services.
Yeah.
That sounds like the dream come true, because you don't have to wouldn't want to go to the Christian church. Wouldn't want to drive into the parking lot and walk into the mega church and, hey, blessings, partner, you know, whatever. I wouldn't want to do the whole fake thing. But I wouldn't mind if people like just fell in love with these songs. Anyway, but there are lots of biblical references in my songs. It's really funny.
It's interesting.
Anyway, so there was this point where
like the Warhawks and the George Bush is what you're talking about. When they were, you know, in our church community, there were people of that political stripe. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was this moment where the kids were
a lot of them. I would say the majority.
Yeah. The kids were probably like 7, 8, or something. And the pastor of the church, I'm not going to use any names, but the pastor of the church invited this veteran guy who was a Marine, a former Marine, up to talk about respect for the flag, the United States flag. And he was explaining how you fold it into a triangle when someone dies in the military, and you do. And he said he got really angry about, he goes, you know, what really makes me mad is the fact that companies make flag plates and mugs for picnics, and they make flag tablecloths. And he goes, it's so irreverent. You're not allowed to do that. He goes, and I saw someone who had a flag rug. And he goes, if anyone ever put their foot on the flag, I would beat the tar out of them. And it occurred to me that, I mean, I don't know if you know that expression, but it goes back to like, it's a slave, the slave.
Sure, he probably didn't know that.
No one, people use it all the time. But, and my niece was sitting in the front row, and she's African-American, you know? And I was like, I remember writing an email to the pastor and said, like, it wasn't your fault, but you invited someone up onto the pulpit that the kids are looking up at, like, with respect. And he said this thing that was so offensive, like racist slur, that I probably have said myself. But in that context, it was just totally wrong.
Right.
And I don't think I took the kids back after that, because I felt like I was exposing them to just things that I didn't believe, and the way, you know what I mean? And it just felt like at that.
Yeah, there are these moments where the humanness, the sort of the human, what's the word? Like there's a sort of abstract idea that that was part of my journey away from believing. That's just like, you know, our human brain is a filter and a lens for all of this spiritual ideas. And so like, there's no way it can manifest in the world except through a human lens. And by the time it does that, like as a church manifests through any human lens, no matter how, how good that lens is, it's already skewed. Like the truths are already filtered. Like whatever the true picture is of God and love and whatever, it's already become polluted by humans once it turns into a church. Like, and then there's those moments that you describe where that becomes really clear, like how human this institution is rather than spiritual.
Right.
Like here's a guy who's saying stuff that has really nothing to do with the church, and it's being done in the church's name.
Yeah.
And so like, how do you sort of like reconcile those two things? And, so like, I think everybody in those moments is reconciling those two things. And there's a lot of people that just assimilate them immediately without question, I think, probably. They just are like, oh, okay, well, that's part of this. So now the flag, how I think about the flag is part of this whole thing. And and they probably, maybe they're not even, like, they're not critical about it. Other people are, maybe just somewhere in the middle, and they're like, whatever. Like, I like coming to church because my buddies are here. And then, there's, like, you were really uncomfortable about it. Did you get a response to that letter?
Yeah, I mean, we went back and forth, and he was like, I'm really sorry, blah, blah, blah. And honestly, the second thing that happened was someone got up and gave a report about Haiti, which this was back in the 90s, maybe early 2000s. And I did my own research. I went to q.com and I went, whatever. No, but I did some research, and I found that the idea of like Vodun as a religion, if you were to map it across to Catholicism, there are like 37 things that are identical in terms of saint. There's a group of saints that have done the same things, and the idea, the voodoo, which is this sort of negative, voodoo dolls and all that, that was like a creation of Hollywood in the 1930s. It was like very racist. I'm freezing. I don't know why. I don't. So they got up and they gave this report on Haiti that was just like, we can't wait for the government to be overthrown so that we can bring Christianity to these poor lost souls who are devil worshippers or something. And I was like, I wrote to my pastor or talked to him on the phone about that, and I was like, that's just inappropriate, man. Like that's.
And what's weird is that's like almost directly not Swedenborgian in a way.
Oh,
like
no.
the Swedenborgian church in particular was, among churches, pretty disinterested in evangelizing itself and spreading itself, because built into the doctrines of the Swedenborgian church was this idea that, like if you just did the best you could according to what you were taught, you were saved. Like you didn't need to, there wasn't like a checklist of things you had to believe in order to be saved. Like if, we had, and the way that was handled in the Swedenborgian church, and correct me if I'm misstating, but the way I understand it was that, like if you're just some, say, indigenous person who has obviously never been exposed to the church's teachings, or you're in Haiti and you have a slightly different, or let's just go with that guy's view of it being radically different belief system, which is not really an accurate reflection, but it's his stereotype of what the Haitians believed. Even if that were true, like that person, if they're just doing their best and they're being a generally good person, they're fine. They're going to be saved by God. They go into that lowest tier of heaven, right? We had the three, and then they get like sort of like re-instructed, they go to school, so to speak, in the spiritual world, and they have opportunities to like level up. That was right?
Yeah. No.
Like the highest heaven was reserved for the people who had both the good works and the truth.
Yeah. Swedenborg did create I would say a framework that was kind of scientific in its complexity, and it sort of addressed, as you say, like all of these questions that we have, like what's heaven like? Where do I go if I do this? How does, like, what are sins, and what, like what, and the one thing that really got me as a young person was he, and if I'm misunderstanding this, may some Swedenborgian correct me, and I did freeze. His ideas of hell was that everyone self-selects for heaven and hell based on their ruling love. So the love that they develop on the planet as a human directs where they want to go, and they don't want to go to heaven because they aren't allowed to lie and cheat and steal and kill people, or hurt people. So they want
so like
to go
the
to a
idea
place,
that your spiritual sort of eternity is defined by your ruling love. Like it's built around whatever your ruling love is on earth. So like your spiritual eternity could be basically like life on earth, kind of a shitty life, dog eat dog, zero sum life on earth, if that's kind of the place where you seem to enjoy life or whatever, except that you're only going to be surrounded by people who also are like you.
Right, which he would say is that's what makes it hell, is that
That's what makes it hell.
Yeah,
right.
like, so it's
exactly, yeah.
It's different from,
but
like,
it kind of definitely totally a total refactor of like what hell, like, because other Christian religions, hell is the fiery place, right? Like, it's a total rejection and total refactoring of what hell is, and it makes a lot more sense.
What's interesting about the Swedenborgian version of hell and that construct of heaven and hell is very much like a tantric thing, because it puts it back on you. You get to pick where you want to go, rather than I'm afraid to go there, so I try not to be a sinner.
It's not even that you're picking. Like, your life is like the way you live your life is your way of picking. Like, there's not like an explicit choosing.
Right.
Like, every moment of your life is part of that choosing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to read and meditate on the word of the Lord, and then live according to
Right.
So that was really fascinating to me. And then I started studying. Actually, a big component of my journey was going into the study of Eastern philosophies through the yoga world. Like, we would have Sanskrit scholars, and Kashmir Shaivism is this North Indian 5,000-year-old version of Tantra that's been, we use the word Tantra from the 60s. It got kind of painted as like a sex cult, but it's just totally not that at all. So,
right.
But very different from classical yoga and from Hinduism and things like that. But studying those things too, kind of brought me all the way back around to sort of look at the construct. And I'll say this: I live in a house that's considered haunted. Like, a lot of people come in who are like, and they're like, oh, I saw this little thing out of the corner of my eye. And honestly, I will say this: like, I would like to be the kind of I think I would like to be the kind of person that believes in ghosts and could see one, but at the back of my mind, there's just zero chance that that's ever going to happen. Like, I'm too empirical and too scientific, and I just don't.
I'm kind of like, I take the same view that I take of God. Like, maybe, I definitely feel like there is a whole, like, what we are able to see and understand about reality is just a tiny pinpoint of what is actual reality.
Yeah.
And even in the like, even if you just limit that to what science already knows, like, what we are able to see with our senses is already just a fraction of that, right? Like,
it's crazy.
When you think of what a honeybee sees versus what we can see, like, it sees an entire different, like, light range than we can, right? So even other biological living creatures have a completely, different, broader, in some cases, picture of just objective reality than humans do. And then, that's not even to mention things like consciousness, human consciousness, like the hard problem of human consciousness. So, like, I sort of feel like there very well could be other beings in my house, other consciousnesses in some embodied form or disembodied form or whatever. Maybe I'll see one day, maybe I won't. Like, I wouldn't put it out of the question that I would ever see one, because I've had enough experience on, like, psychedelics and stuff that I just can't explain it all. And they've just, like, opened my mind to possibilities that I go, I don't know. Who knows? Like, there's so much I'm already not seeing.
Yeah.
Like, why would I cross that one off the list of the possible?
Yeah. That's interesting. I feel like, when, back to the ghost thing, like, when my daughter would tease me that I would, that sort of, what was it, situational bias, or the kind of bias where you go, oh my God, it's 108. that's an auspicious number. And like I looked at the clock and it was 108. Like, and my daughter would be like, well, you've looked at the clock like 75,000 times and you never even thought about it. But now that it's 108, you're like, oh, it's auspicious. Anyway, but like a good example is like my wife and I, my father-in-law passed away from cancer, and we went up to celebrate his birthday on Mount Lemmon. We went hiking. A storm moved in. We were coming down the mountain, and we stopped at that place like on the Mount Lemmon Road where you're like overlooking the valley. And there was this crazy 2 monsoons like converging in the middle of the valley, and the lightning was like going across. Like it was just like back and forth like that. And my wife was crying, you know. I feel like I was like, oh my God, like it felt like, you know, my father-in-law was like trying to like say like, hey, everything's okay. Like it's a celebrate. It was like a fireworks display and the most beautiful sunset I'd ever seen. And it happened to coincide with this celebration and the timing was amazing, right? Like if I had scripted it, tried to make it that impressive.
And there's a million like vignettes like that where, you know, somebody dies and then in the successive weeks, their dog that they previously owned exhibits some behavior that really looks like they're seeing that person, right? Like those stories exist, like many of them, right? Like Rupert Sheldrake is a guy who is a fascinating scientist, and he catalogs a lot of that kind of stuff because he's interested in sort of dimensions of science that haven't yet been sort of like measured or are, you know, considered measurable. Like he started out with, his son is a what do you call it? Mycologist, mushroom guy, mushroom and fungi. And he's a writer too. He writes amazing stuff. But Rupert Sheldrake, his first forays into that, where he was kind of blacklisted in a way by a lot of the scientific community, he started raising questions he started studying like how birds, it was specifically like how birds find their way from point to point in the world. And so like they've done all these tests where it's like, well, it's magnetic poles. Well, they've figured out how to like disable the bird's ability to sense magnetic fields. And so then, but they still were able to do it. Well, it's sight. Well, they did it and they blinded birds and they still could do it. Like, so basically like he started developing these hypotheses around there's some other thing happening that the birds are tuning into that we don't know what he called them morphic fields. And it's like, because he's like, there is obviously some other thing because we've sort of like we've controlled for all the things that everybody has explained. And it didn't answer the question. Like, so there's something that we're not seeing that is influencing. And I'll call it morphic fields just as a placeholder because we need to figure out what it is. It's something. Well, I think because he named it, it's sort of like, other scientists kind of thought, well, that's kind of woo-woo. Like we don't just make up things that don't exist, right? And he's tried to argue like, I'm not positing that there is a thing called morphic fields. I'm kind of just naming a phenomenon as a placeholder for just to sort of point to something we don't know yet, right? So, I don't know why I started on that, but like. Anyway, so I'm not sure what triggered that whole digression.
I think one of the things that I appreciated about being raised in a Swedenborgian religion was Swedenborg had this like the core of many of his works and his sort of longest, he had 40 volumes or something that he wrote.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were looking at the Old Testament, like the Torah stories, and interpreting them as symbolic like suggestions for how to live, you know, like just an example was the children of Israel being stuck in the desert for 40 years and then escaping across the Red Sea, and that is about a person's own spiritual journey. And like as soon as you like paste that onto it, it's like, wow, it's very, because we as a human species, we love stories. We love that the story can tell us a lot more, or to help impress upon us a fact or a mindset or a belief system better than like just a factual thing. And so I loved that, and I think I've incorporated it hopefully in my art and my own work.
Like sort of the notion of correspondences or whatever.
Yeah, correspondences, but even just the idea that like Swedenborg suggested at one point that like he would interpret the Old Testament, then the New Testament with Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and the Revelation with a symbolic underpinning, like a symbolic sort of secret framework or secret meaning.
Right.
And then he said, my own work should be seen as something that has a symbolism, is really just a symbolic overlay. And if you dig deep into it, you'll find like the sort of the true meaning of even what I'm saying. Because I'm locked by, I'm like a white Northern European male stuck in 1759, writing these things. So like, I'm clearly like not the most, you know what I mean? Like he's, so
like I can't be representative for the truth because it's like what we said earlier, like it's filtered through my
anachronisms,
my subjectivity in some way.
Like he has one thing I wanted to go back to is when you were talking about the, if you looked at other species, like if you looked at my octopus teacher, that octopus, I'm going to, spoiler alert, but like she only lives for 18 months. Like her life cycle is so short that the person who comes down, the cinematographer and the person who's interacting with her is literally like a fucking god from Mount Olympus because they live forever compared to her. You know what I mean? Like if I were her, I'd be like, how long do you live? And the guy would be like, I live for 77 years. And they're like, holy shit. Like that's so, I can't even count how many lifetimes that is on my 2, tentacles or whatever, like it's, you know what I mean? Like it's all relative. And from the perspective of, anyway, that's something that's interesting to me too. Like you were talking about a bee, like the bee can see all these things that we can't see. The bird can, and then
it makes me think of what, sorry, you were.
No, go.
It makes me think of one of the arguments that, that atheists sometimes make about, doubt to sort of like question the existence of God. So if you watch like debates between like Richard Dawkins and people, various pastors, or Sam Harris and various, there were these guys, they were 2 of them. Christopher Hitchens, I think, was one. There were 4 guys that they called the 4 horses of, atheism or whatever. There was the new atheist movement some 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And one of the arguments they sometimes point to is like, look at the suffering that God allows. Like, why would this God that you believe in, and your explanation that it's like, well, God is mysterious, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's such an unsatisfying explanation. Like, why would he allow what's happening in Gaza, for example, or whatever, right? Like, and you're talking about like your mention of like this person who lives into their 70s, interacting with the octopus, sort of like if you stretch that 70s to infinity, right? Like infinity is not even a number, right? It's just a concept. And so like, even if somebody's entire human existence was nothing but suffering, then from God's standpoint, as an infinite being, even that fades into total insignificance, like beyond insignificance. Not even a rounding error, beyond insignificance,
beyond
right?
Insignificant,
like, so like it literally is nothing compared to infinity, right? So like that to me is the rebuttal. Like it doesn't convince me that God exists, but I think that is a good answer to that one question.
It's a very, very interesting point.
Like God can be unconcerned with that suffering because it literally is nothing to be concerned about, because it literally is nothing. So to me, that's a little bit of maybe a potential answer to that one question that I've never heard anyone answer it with, but anyway.
That's interesting. That was one of the things as a child that used to drive me crazy is we read these stories in the Bible at, Sunday school or something.
Yeah.
And cruelty would happen. Or like, the one that really killed me was, in the Old Testament, they make the Ark of the Covenant, and then they're supposed to not touch it. They can't touch it. It's against the rules to touch it. And then they're walking up the mountain and this guy trips and it's tipping over. And one of the guys that's carrying it reaches out and stops it from hitting the ground.
Yeah.
And it says in the Old Testament, and then the Lord, to punish them, the Lord opened up a crack in the earth and swallowed him and his whole family as a punishment. And I remember just like crying and being like, why would the Lord do, that's just so stupid.
Yeah, there's
like,
so many fucked up.
he was
stories
trying to
of
help
God in the Old Testament, right? Like that.
Totally.
So many weird, like the whole Job story is like completely fucked up. Like testing that guy, like it's just sadistic, right? Like testing Abraham's loyalty, right? His faith.
Yeah.
It's sadism, right? Like it's a sadistic God. That's one of the arguments that the atheists would give to, like, your Bible portrays not just like a limited God, but like an actually sort of psychopathic, sort of sadistic God. Like, how do you explain that, right? Like,
he's a mean motherfucker.
There's even one story of Jesus that I had never known about, but Louis C.K. does a comedy bit on it, and it's about Jesus and the fig tree. Do you know that one?
The one Jesus, where it withers?
Yeah, he encounters a fig tree and he's like interested. He wants a fig, but it's not the season. Like, I think that in the verse it says like it's not the season, and Jesus is so like pissed off that he curses the tree, and it like immediately like bursts into flames or whatever, or withers. And it was like, huh, that's interesting.
I remember that story.
I didn't remember that, and I went back to the Bible. I was like, let me read this. He's like definitely misrepresenting it somehow because it's a comedy bit. No, I mean, he literally, that's what he does. He curses the tree because it wasn't the season for figs. And he's like, fuck you, tree.
Well,
and
yeah,
I mean, the tree dies. So yeah, Jesus was that's pretty uncharacteristic. It's more Old Testament God coming out in that moment.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, it's interesting because I always sort of push Jesus into the realm of, like the who would Jesus bomb, like the whole.
Yeah.
Do you remember that the Magas had that there was a meme that was going around.
But like hangry Jesus is a different one, I guess.
They had a meme that went around where it said if Jesus had an AR-15, things would have turned out completely different. Yeah. Things would have gone. They have a picture of Jesus with an AR-15, and you're like, huh. Anyway, it is fascinating. I think so. Looking back on our town and like growing up in the town, I do remember having maybe like in college, like or going back after I was in New York for a while, and looking at the town and thinking like, wow, there's such it's a small town, but there's like 1,000 or 1,500 people who of all walks of life, like physicists and scientists and newspaper people and house cleaners, and they all kind of are drawn to go to church and like read these things and believe it. And I was like, how can it be so consistent? Like it just didn't. It felt kind of odd to me. Even like in my own family. I mean, there were a few atheists. Like my uncle was an atheist. He was a scientist and an atheist, and that he was considered like, oh, poor Uncle Mike. Like he only comes to church on Easter because he wants to come to dinner or something. Like, and that poor guy. They was like seen as like, oh, he fell into the trap of atheism, which happens.
Secularism, whatever. Yeah.
If you go study outside the town, like you'll fall into the secular.
Yeah, he was indoctrinated. I love that they call that indoctrinated. Like you were It's the opposite, right? They're all indoctrinated, and like you've been exposed to other ideas, but that somehow is called indoctrination. Like, oh, I was exposed to more ideas, so I've been indoctrinated. No, I've been ex-doctrinated.
Right. We were. There's a couple of. We have a friend who. Has been exploring the fact that she was brought up in a cult and like has been, she's about my age, but she's been working through just patterning things and like, boundary issues and stuff because she was brought up in a cult, right? Her parents like had her in a cult. And then this other woman came down and she's trying to extricate her grandkids from a cult in Sedona that's falling apart. Like the cult leader died and there's like a bunch of fighting. And she said, it's really stressful. And I said, the religion that I was brought up in is listed in a list of cults. Like, I don't know if you knew that. But
yeah, I knew that. I don't know what the authority of that list is, but yeah, I remember hearing that.
It's like a book of cults, and they just. But
I don't know who curated the list, but yeah, I've heard that it is on a list of cults.
And the criteria.
But I never dug into it to be like, who's actually in charge of this supposed list? Because
Right, like if you had like a criteria of like 10 things, and like if 3 out of 10 means you're a cult, like if you, one of the things I thought was funny growing up, I used to say that we were like Mormons because John Smith found these tablets and the angel Moroni helped him translate them.
Yeah, but the more you dig into that whole story, the more that sort of falls apart.
So then what was ironic, and he was in the Finger Lakes region where there are a lot of magic mushrooms. So let's leave it there.
But what it really starts to look like, if you really look at Joseph Smith, is that like he wanted to bang multiple women and have multiple wives, and he like did like a post facto sort of like rationalization for it. And he was like, I'm just going to call it I'm going to say that I was given this extra special status as a prophet and I can do it.
Right. Well,
and
anyway,
here's the proof, which I can't show you because
exactly.
I just can't. Yeah.
Like what's so awkward about the story is that he gave him these tablets, he wrote it all down, the Book of Moroni, and then he took the tablets away. Like if he at least had made tablets.
Yeah. That's what's so sus about it, right? Like it really does like all sort of feel like dude just wanted to have polygamy for himself. Like literally that's all he wanted. He wanted to not get killed or charged with polygamy.
Do you think?
And so like he made up this whole religion to sort of rationalize his desire to have multiple wives.
Do you think there was ever a point when it was starting to grow rapidly and like people were coming from Europe like to be part of the Mormon church? Like, do you think that he was like, oh shit, what have I done? Like now I have to like actually.
I don't think so. He was killed too young to have any of that sort of like self-reflection, I think.
Okay. But like Brigham
Young was killed along that growth curve pretty early.
Yeah. He was killed in Illinois. It's a pretty interesting story. Yeah. Basically by a mob that was going to lynch him.
Yeah.
And he was shot and fell out
because
of a window.
they saw through his game, which was, anyway.
I mean, if you read, what's interesting is when he was shot, this is something that my daughter and I looked up because when he was shot in Illinois, was it Illinois or Michigan? Yeah. The governor just wouldn't send troops to like secure the house. He was arrested for something. And it says, in the Wikipedia history that his neighbors were jealous of his business prowess and therefore wanted to like sort of kick them out or something, Anyway, so which is an interesting thing. And then you follow along, man, if you drive down through Utah, like headed toward Page, like through Zion, and there's like that Meadow Massacre where like the Mormons killed all this pilgrims coming across or whatever, pioneers. Like there's some dark shit at the back of that.
Totally. Oh yeah. I mean, I think about that kind of thing a lot. Just in, like I'm secondhand connection to the Catholic Church through my wife and her family, right? And they're like, especially like on her sister, and they're devout. That's the word. Devout, like hardcore. We go on vacation with them, and they need to find like the Catholic Church to go to on Sunday when we're, like in freaking Hawaii or wherever, right? Like.
Wow.
Like they can't miss it a week. And, the Catholic Church, there were some really, really, really terrible popes back in the day. But even in recent history, you have like what they did to the Native Americans and what they, the stuff that some of them wrote to justify chattel slavery, right? Like with scripture, and like, then very recently, all the child sexual abuse stuff, right? Like the Catholic Church is tremendously guilty as and then, like, well, you say, well, it's a few bad apples. No, I mean, the church did so much to cover it up and hide it and obfuscate and, like defend these guys and keep them from facing any accountability, right? Like the institution is guilty of so much, not just individuals. And
it's true.
And so, like that doesn't immediately disqualify the idea of a church also having a valuable side, like the Mormons. Even if the whole Mormon church, for example, is built on this scam that I oversimplified, but like a scam. Let's say it's just a scam that this guy like saw the tablets, which is almost certainly a scam.
Right? Unless he had taken psilocybin mushrooms.
Okay,
and actually,
so he may have had a vision. Sure,
yeah, I'm just thinking,
sure, like to be charitable, but like. It's still just kind of like a pretty dubious origins of this church. And that doesn't necessarily disqualify the possibility that the Mormon church can be a positive thing in a segment of people's lives. And it is a force for good in not necessarily every Mormon's life, but is, like a number of them. And the same thing with the Catholic Church, like all of its dark history doesn't disqualify it from being also a good thing as well in the lives of certain people. Like I look at my Catholic, in-laws, and, I wouldn't say that they are, practicing a satanic, thing that is just 100% evil just because the church has done a whole bunch of evil stuff, right? Like those are separate things, but it definitely affects my view of the Catholic Church. Like when I'm sitting there in the pew, like I feel like I'm me as a non-believer. In a way, I feel like I'm giving it a little bit of a it feels like an exculpatory action to be sitting in the pew there and being like, hey, hey church, I'm here, you're cool, it's all good. But and I don't want to offer that to the Catholic Church. So that I do struggle with that a little bit. Yeah.
When I was on my honeymoon with my wife, we drove from Madrid up to the north coast of Spain and then back down, and we would visit a lot of cathedrals. Like I might have said this before, but anyone from South America, anyone from like a former Spanish colony, if they show their passport, they can get into museums or any of those things are free.
Yeah,
and like we go
because they were built on the stolen resources of all those people. Yeah,
exactly. So there's this like little bit of like, oh, I remember this woman be like, well, so what? I guess you had to show your passport at some museum, and she was like, you know that all of these are free. Like if you just show your Colombian passport. And I was like, what about me? And she goes, no, you're not Americans.
You're one of the colonizers. Sorry, dude.
You're the colonizer. So anyway, but we would walk into this cathedral, and it was honestly, compared to the one where we grew up, like just like 10 times bigger and just startlingly difficult to build, especially in those days without, cranes and fossil fuel engines and stuff. And I remember just thinking like, this is all paid for with colonial gold, like, stolen gold, it's like unbelievable.
Yeah.
But you're right. So back to this sort of where we, I mentioned where I had the thing when you were going through school, like, was there a point like that moment?
I mean, you touched on a lot of the dimensions of where I started to question things. So I would say like multiple holes developed. So one of the holes was just this non-dualist thing that you pointed out. Like the church itself, if it is meant to be the vehicle for Swedenborg's true sort of teachings, it kind of is cherry picking a little bit. It kind of already, just in its own existence, it's already sort of misrepresenting the teachings just by virtue of its very existence.
And can I clarify that? It's been clear ever since we were in college that Swedenborg warned, do not try to make an organized religion based on my works because it will be corrupted by narcissism.
So then I encountered that at some point, and it was like, okay. And I think I encountered that through William Blake at some point, I think.
Yeah, he was
I think he pointed to that in something that he wrote. And I remember, like our church kind of would, in our church's library, we had William Blake's books. And so there was this, they were always really excited about any previous historical figure who was a Swedenborgian, like Helen Keller, right? Johnny Appleseed, right? Yeah. Right. So, that was one of the holes that developed for me. Another one was, I think loosely connected to that, was also something you touched on, which is just, this idea that, hey, there are all these other peoples in the world and belief systems in the world. And so, I'm glad that my church teaches that they aren't damned by just the very fact that they have not been exposed to the stuff that I'm being exposed to here. Like they're not forever damned, like some of these old Christian churches believe that we need to go and convert those people ASAP, or they're going to roast in the fires of hell. So at least my church isn't teaching me that. But just the more deeply I thought about all of those other belief systems, I just thought, like, what makes them any different than this one? Like, if this church is a sort of a misrepresentation of some bigger set of truths and teachings, if my church is already sort of a misrepresentation of that, like, how is that different than every single other belief system on the planet? Like every other one of them was made by men trying to manifest or contain or be a vehicle for some set of truths. And I just like, the more I extrapolated that, the more I thought, like, all of it is just a product of people's minds doing their, like, in the best cases, doing their best to sort of like create something good in the world. And then I connected that to, the reasons why Swedenborg said they were saved, which was like, as long as they're living well and basically being, good people in the world, good actors in the world based on what they were taught, that they're fine. They're good. Like they're saved. They're going to heaven. And I thought, well, that's effectively just the golden rule, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I sort of like somewhere along the way had this epiphany, like, dude, like if we all just could master the golden rule, like what is the point of any other part of the church? Like all of that just seems like aesthetics and trappings and like hobby. It's a hobby. Like you're doing it for a hobby. Like you like singing the songs. Like,
right.
Okay, cool. Like I'm glad you like that. But that, like, it's not the only thing that really matters, according to that made sense to me, was like, oh, there's like a golden rule kind of at the center of this, and that's enough to save you, no matter what you believe in any of these places. And so it's just like the whole faith side of it just dissipated entirely for me. Like, what is the point? Like, why do you need to believe any of this stuff? Like, it's obviously a product of some limited human minds. And some of those limited human minds came up with a system called, reincarnation. And some of those human minds came up with a system called nirvana that ends in nirvana. And some of those human minds came up with other things, right? Like mine came up with this God and this, figure. And so like, what's ultimately the difference? Like, why would I, one of them came up with Allah, like Allah. So like, why would I pick one versus another? It just seems so arbitrary, because it just felt like, oh, they're all just created by people. But at the core of them, like, what is the purpose of them? Why do they exist at all? Well, they exist to sort of like cultivate in communities good people who are, kind, compassionate, generous actors in the world. That's the golden rule. So it's like, why does any of the other stuff matter at all? Like, it's so arbitrary. Like, it matters for earthly reasons alone. Like, you can pick one church because you like the people there and you like the music and you think they are doing a particularly good job of, supporting worthy causes or whatever, right? So that was a big part of it for me. And I think another part of it was, like you touched on this with the guy with the American flag. Like there was sort of a hypocrisy that I started to see too, especially around homosexuality. Like when I started to have a circle of friends that included, gay friends. I just had gay and lesbian friends back then. I didn't know any trans people, but like in New York, when I moved to New York, right? And I, in our circle of friends had, some LGBTQ people, right? Like, who I was taught were, living in a state of sin, and they were, kind of don't expose yourself to those people, right? But then, it was so clear that, oh, these are great people, right? They're like beautiful people. Like all my friends are lovely people. Like I'm not friends with people who are terrible people. Like they just wouldn't be my friends, right? So like this whole notion of like, I guess it's in a way is similar to the concept of like a victimless crime. Like sort of like if you're just living your life, how can that be sinful? Like it's a victimless crime, if it's a crime at all. And then it just like it faded away. Like how can there even be such thing as a victimless crime? Like there's no such thing as a victimless crime.
I was staying with my parents for
it's not a crime
for Christmas, and we often will have this conversation about Swedenborgianism and like where, I've talked a little bit about that before, but one of the things that came up was the idea, does Swedenborg ever talk about anything? Does he ever make any homophobic statements?
Yeah.
He certainly talks about like the importance of a man and a woman and sort of like divine love and wisdom, these sort of two things. But so we did we went on and did our own research. We went to q.com and we followed the links. No, but we did. There was a guy who, I think he might be in Australia, who went searching through all of Swedenborg's 40 volumes and basically tabulated references or citations where he mentions, and he doesn't talk about homosexuality.
Yeah.
He may mention in the Bible like sexual assault, like Sodom and Gomorrah, like that places where sexual assault, which is there's rape and sodomy in the Bible, in the Old Testament, and he may talk about that, but he's talking about sexual assault, not like partnership, you know? And I found that really interesting because I grew up in a homophobic culture in the church, and there isn't nothing in Swedenborg that's homophobic. So
that's why it was a hole for me. It was like my church is teaching me this thing, and I didn't go through the the exercise of trying to figure out whether Swedenborg taught anything about that. But it was like my church is teaching me the thing that's so intuitively not true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you came to that conclusion yourself.
In reality, that there's a disconnect there, and so my church is clearly wrong. Like it was just clear that it's wrong in this area, and so it's like, well, again, that's more proof that it's just a product of some men's minds, right? Some dudes that made a church, and it makes me think of it's interesting, like in the latest like sort of beefs with the Pope, the MAGA crowd and the Pope, and sort of adjacent beefs between the evangelical MAGA crowd and James Tallarico, and they attacks on the Pope and the attacks on him. This sort of the one theme I've heard in common from evangelicals, or seen them say, is that they are, they're the problem there. The sort of the strain. What am I trying to say? The line of argument that they're taking is that Tallarico and the Pope, by talking about like peace and Palestine and like, preventing the deaths and the immigration, right? Like locking people up, like when they're speaking out against those things, the problem with that, this is the argument of the evangelicals, is they're not focused on people's personal morality. They're like on these bigger issues. And that's not really the stuff that, Christianity is about. It's really about your personal morality. And by that, what of course they mean is like, are you gay? Definitely can't be, or trans, right? Like, are you looking at porn, right? Like that's what they mean by personal morality. And, it's interesting to see them, because that's clear in their practicing of Christianity, that's what they are focused on. Like those are the issues they're focused on above all. Sodomy, whatever, right? All those things. And they're obviously totally unconcerned with, immigrants and social justice and any of that stuff, right? But it was interesting to hear them, basically bring that into an argument, like to say it out loud, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like it seemed like they were confronted with this disconnect, this distinction, and they were like, oh shit, we have to figure out how to create it, how to sort of formulate a justification for the way we're doing it. And that, like I had never heard them articulate it like out loud, like, oh yeah, it's not about social justice. It's about your personal morality. That's what Christianity is supposed to be about, right? I just never heard a Christian like go there and make that argument like so explicitly. But so, I'm seeing that. And it strikes me that like, I think one of the things that you often see that's troubling among sort of conservative Christians is this sort of pattern of like, I don't care about it until it affects me personally. You know what I mean? So it's like, and you see it with like, oh, the tariffs, they're hitting my business. So now I care about the tariffs, right? Oh, my neighbor is an immigrant. My housekeeper was an immigrant or whatever. My daycare, the daycare lady was an immigrant and she got detained and shit. Now I have no daycare. Oh shit. Oh, my hospital bills are crazy, right? Like the insurance companies are crazy. Like we need to change our healthcare system, right? Like you see that over and over and over again. Like, I don't give a shit about this issue, but now it affects me and now I do, right? And it feels like it's one and the same with this sort of like your personal morality versus social justice, right? Like it's very much this sort of American this sort of conservative American stereotypical pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's all about you. Fuck other people. Like the sovereign self. Like there's so many aspects of sort of the American mindset or sort of an American mindset that are really about, serving yourself and fuck everyone else. And this strikes me as like, it's interesting to see that Christianity has come up with a line of argument that basically just like fits right into that so well. It's a personal morality, not social justice. And even the prosperity gospel, it's like the prosperity gospel at its root basically teaches, like if you are wealthy, like these crazy pastors with their fucking private jets and stuff, if you have achieved that level of wealth, then obviously God has favored you.
Right.
And conversely, if you are destitute and struggling, obviously you must have done something wrong in the eyes of God, right? So they've created like an argument. They've created a doctrine that justifies fuck other people. Accumulate your own wealth and fuck everybody else. And it's so interesting to see how institutionalized that is in that particular strain of Christianity. How formal, how much that's been formalized. Anyway,
I wanted to go. That's true, and sort of shocking, but it's also a pattern. Like there's thousands of years of that. One thing I wanted to point out, I was at the Waldorf school. My kids were little. I was helping them with some graphic design to do a newsletter, and they wanted to do. I guess it was. I actually don't know what time of year it is, but they wanted to use the woman clothed with the sun.
From the Book of Revelation.
Yeah, and my uncle had done a painting, and so we used that and got permission to use that for the cover. And then the woman knew that I went to the Swedenborg church, and she was Rudolf Steiner, an acolyte or like a studied hymn. Yeah. And she said, how do you reconcile, or how do you reconcile what Swedenborg says, his interpretation or his sort of unpacking of the symbolism of the story of Revelation? And I said, I guess I don't know what that is, because it never occurred. She goes, go home, crack it open, read it, and you'll see see my question.
Apocalypse revealed, yeah.
And the dragon and the baby and the mother, like the Michael with the angel. And he says that the dragon is the Christian Reformed Church, not the Catholics, but the Reformed Christian Church has fallen into a love of falsity and wants to devour the child, which is the writings, I guess. And I remember thinking like no one really talks about that in Bernathen. Like no one talks about that in our hometown, in the church. No one gives sermons about it, because it's pretty fucking prophetic, right? Like if you look today, you're like, damn, man, that's sort of what happened, right? And it's kind of what's going on right now.
It's really interesting to see like how much when you think about like what the Pharisees and the Sadducees were in the New Testament to Jesus, like there's a level to which, fucking J.D. Vance saying, the Pope should be very, very careful when he talks about matters of theology. Like just the fucking audacity of this newly baptized Catholic to say that about the Pope.
Yeah.
When the Pope is talking about war, and it happens to be Pope Leo, who is of the Augustinian tradition.
Yeah.
That is St. Augustine, who wrote Just War Theory, right? So just there's so many levels to which there's just like an such the audacity of Vance to say that, right? But it's also like there's such a Pharisee kind of mindset to like be gatekeeping other people's way of practicing religion, right?
Yeah,
and so it's just wild how much these guys are Pharisees in a way when they're critiquing Tallarico or whatever, or anybody else who's not a conservative Christian.
Yeah
the particular arguments and rhetoric they use just feel like, dude, can't you just see that you are the Pharisees and the Sadducees in this moment?
It's true.
Like when they talk about woke Jesus, like they're really just revealing it themselves. Like they're just telling on themselves when they literally will say that Jesus was too woke or whatever, right? Like should have had an AK-47. It's wild.
Yeah, if he had had an AR-15, things would have turned out differently,
Yeah. for sure.
Right. Well, I think we can call it if you want. But that was a super interesting dive for me, for sure.
Yeah. Makes me want to go back and read some of those Swedenborg works again.
Yeah. Let's come back
now
next week. And
I want to read Divine Love and Wisdom now, and I want to read Apocalypse Revealed.
Let's report on. One of the things that I found absolutely fascinating was the discrete and continuous degrees, which was like a vertical and to me, like the Higgs boson particle, like the whole idea of string theory, like it's leaning in that direction, or it's sort of, and even the grand man of heaven, which is like the universe is one giant human form, and like we're just like little molecules.
Oh yeah, I would love to talk more about that, because like kind of back to the original, like early in this conversation, just about like the mysteries of consciousness, and like you sort of hinted at, like, well, maybe it all is just divine energy, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's something there. It's interesting. And there's some science that's weirdly leaning in that direction, but they wouldn't call it divine energy. They have other notions of what to like.
Well,
but yeah.
And in Swedenborg's model, there isn't like a hell down there and a heaven up there. It's like frequencies. So like, the solid is one frequency, and then there's like higher frequencies that you couldn't detect if you were a solid, because, so like they're all encapsulated. Like heaven is right here, right now, the different levels, and so is hell. It's very fascinating. Let's talk about that next week. That sounds good.
For sure.
All
right, my brother.
Have a great day.
You too.
Satellite Haiku. Okay, bye.
Satellites? A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth.